Alright, so we're back with part 2 of this 3-video series where I cover the Dynasty Deep Dive. And this video right here will cover the recruiting. This was one of the biggest parts of the Dynasty Deep Dive, and this right here covers a lot. So expect this one to be a little longer than our last video, which covered the coaching deep dive. And as we all know, building a program is very crucial in college football. And College Football 25 doesn't fall short of that. Recruiting is the lifeblood of college football. And if a team wants to consistently win, they have to bring in those guys year in and year out. Or else, you will be looking at a rebuild very soon. Now, you will be spending majority of your time on the high school recruiting trail. But today, the transfer portal is just as important. And while performing your recruiting tasks on NCAA Football 14, you didn't feel like you built a relationship with your players. And this was something we had in previous college football games, but they couldn't get it right because some felt like some of the recruiting in previous versions were a little too tedious. So EA took it upon themselves to make it a simple process, but now we see that they met us in the middle of the road with what we have here today. They focus on 4 core goals when creating this new recruiting system. And the first one was humanizing the recruits, as they gave them unique needs and motivations that we will have to discover by interacting with the recruit. Also, they took into considerations that players from different regions of the country are different in so many ways. Like you have your speedsters that comes from the southeast of the United States, and you have some of your top quarterbacks coming from the state of Texas. And they were able to come up with this by using real world data so that every year when those 3,500 recruits are generated, that you will have players from those regions representing the style of play or the type of player that actually comes from those areas. Also, they focus on having the big universities represented well on the recruiting trail, because in the previous versions, you saw big schools like Alabama, Oklahoma, or Texas fall off due to not being able to recruit. And these universities year in and year out have the most available resources to provide a recruit, which helps them stay at the top when it comes to signing some of the best players around the nation. And your smaller schools, they struggle with offering the same amenities that those big universities have, and it creates a challenge while recruiting some of the top players for them. And last but not least, they focus on making the transfer portal almost unpredictable, meaning the players that are in the transfer portal can make a decision within a split second, and you won't be able to determine that without recruiting. And EA is also introducing a new stage recruiting experience built around 3 phases, which starts with discovery, pitch, and close. You can have up to 35 prospects on your recruitment board at one time, and all of these players will be at different stages of the recruiting process. And the discovery phase is the first stage, and that's where you will uncover the skills and interests of the prospect. And in this phase, you want to uncover the skills and interests quick, because you don't want to spend a lot of your time recruiting a guy that doesn't want to come to your school or doesn't fit your scheme. And once a recruit narrows his top schools down to 5, he will move on to the pitch phase, and this is where you will sell your program. And by using the information you discovered in the discovery phase, you will pitch to the recruit one of the positives that aligns with their motivation. And the final stage is close, where you will want to bring that young man in for a visit and attempt to leave a lasting impression. Now, you might want to invite him to one of your big games, and if you got a win, that would boost the interest from that recruit. Also, that boost could lead to a verbal commit from that player, but he won't make his final decision until National Signing Day, and that leaves the possibility of someone else taking them off of your hand. So you want to be strategic when you close the deal. And a way you can determine what to pitch to the recruit is by checking your school grades. And this year you have 14 grades, which range from D- all the way up to A+. And those 14 grades are playing time, which represents how long it will take for a player to get on the field if he comes to your school. And the next one is playing style, which represents how you play. Another one is championship contender, which measures how close your team is to winning a national championship. And this grade takes into account your current ranking and your current roster standing. Also, another one is program tradition, which represents your program's history and success over time. Meaning, if you won 3 conference championships and 2 national titles in the last 3 years, you can look for your program tradition to be high. Campus lifestyle is one of those as well, which represents the city and area surrounding your university. Now, this one cannot be changed no matter how great your school performs. We also have stadium atmosphere, which is driven by the stadium's toughest places to play ranking. So if your school is one of the top 25 toughest places to play, you can bet that the stadium atmosphere will be a selling point for your recruits. Then you have pro potential, which is determined by how many players you send to the NFL draft. And you also have brand exposure / NIL. As EA said, they couldn't figure out a way to narrow down on how to integrate NILs into this game as the NIL landscape continues to change. They were able to put in brand exposure. So if you have a recruit that's interested in exposing his brand, this is a selling point that you can use. And then you have academic prestige, which is based on real world academic rankings. And this is something that you can't change either. And conference prestige is another one, which represents the overall strength of your conference members. Coach prestige is in there as well, which is a reflection of your coaching staff, and the head coach carries the most weight here, but your coordinators are taken into account as well. You also have coach stability, which represents how long a coaching staff has been in place and how likely they'll be there for the next 4 years. Athletic facilities are taken into account as well, as this represents the quality of the facilities. And last but not least, proximity to home. And this grade is unique because it's based off of the hometown of your school and its distance between the hometown of the recruit. Now you can see all of these grades from your My School screen, which could be accessed from the recruiting hub. And each week the game will give you information about your My School grades. It will show you grades that were negatively and positively impacted by your actions of the previous week, as well as grades that are motivating your players to transfer. So your My School grades form your team prestige, which they said could be thought of as your My School GPA. So this year, team prestige grades teams from 0 to 5 stars, and these stars progress in half-star increments. They also said very few teams will reach the 5-star level. If they do, it will be hard for them to maintain that 5-star level. So you may see some drops from 5 to 4.5 or maybe 4, but that is still a high team's prestige, and you will also have players wanting to come to your university based off of those 4 and 5 stars. Now let's talk a little bit more about the recruits. As I said earlier, that EA say they will be generating 3,500 new recruits each year, and just like real life, each class will be different. So you will see some classes that have a lot of good quarterbacks and some that don't. The generated recruits, player caliber, and ratings will be based off of which region they come from. So don't be looking forward to seeing a bunch of fast guys coming from the state of Idaho. And when it comes to their motivations, we spoke about the 14 different pitches you can sell to them. Now, the motivations that certain recruits care about is based off of their star rating. Like a 5-star prospect will be more interested in playing for a program that can get him to the NFL, as well as expand his brand. Also one that will allow him to win championships. And every recruit will have 3 motivations that they will care about. And those 3 motivations will form their ideal pitch, which you will like to uncover in the discovery phase. They also said that there's a chance that one of those ideal pitches may be a deal breaker for your university, which means if you don't meet that motivation, they will not even waste their time talking to you. And a deal breaker will stay with a player forever. So if you're thinking about picking that same guy up in the transfer portal and your grade in that category has not improved, he still won't talk to you. Now let's talk about recruiting pipelines. And EA used historical recruiting data to determine recruiting pipelines, as they took real-time data at tracking universities and the places they recruit in the most. And they took in consideration that not every state was created equal when it comes to football players. As you know, having a pipeline in Florida is way more valuable than having one in New York. And their goals was to balance the pipelines in quantity and quality based off of the recruits that come from there. So you have states like Florida that are broken up into multiple regions, and states like New York and New Jersey were combined to create one pipeline. And in total, there are 50 pipelines in college football 25, which is the same as having 50 states. And each pipeline has 5 levels, and every school was given a level based off of historical data. The higher your pipeline level means the more influence that you have in that region, meaning a lot of players will be interested in coming to your school. And to keep the big universities' influence alive, your pipeline level will not change. And they said together, pipelines and deal breakers create a more realistic experience when it comes to recruiting and is less exploitable than before. Also, every recruit will start with a list of teams that they're interested in, which is generated by the recruit's motivations and is paired with the university's My School grades. Once the recruiting starts, recruits will narrow their list of teams from open to top 8 to top 5 and top 3, and then finally committing. And your job while recruiting these players is to stay above the cut line each week, or else your team will be out of the race. So the first stage of recruiting is discovery, where you will uncover information about your recruit. And when reviewing the recruit in the prospect list, you will be able to see bio information about that recruit, as well as key recruiting information. And while recruiting players, you must manage your recruiting hours, which you will spend on discovering, pitching, and closing the deal. Teams with higher prestige will have more recruiting hours than a team on the lower side. For example, in the preseason, a 5-star team will receive 1,000 recruiting hours, and a 1-star team will receive 350 recruiting hours. And the time of the year determines how many recruiting hours you will have available as well. So in the preseason and the all-season, you will have more recruiting hours available, as you don't have any games to prepare for each Saturday. And the maximum amount of points you can spend on a recruit per week is 50. But this can be increased to 70 once you unlock the always recruiting ability. During the preseason, you're only able to scout players and offer scholarships. Now, before you start offering scholarships, make sure you're scouting these players accurately. And there's 4 stages of scouting. First is unscouted, which is self-explanatory, which means you haven't spoken to the recruit to uncover any information. And then you have partially scouted, which is the gold zone that covers 25% of the bar space. And when a player is mostly scouted, you have a clear picture of who they are and how they may perform for your team. And at this point, the gold zone only covers 10% of the bar. And when a player is fully scouted, you know everything about this guy and all of his attributes are uncovered. And once the prospect meets your initial criteria, it's time to uncover the motivations that they may have. And there are 5 recruiting actions you can do to uncover this information. You can offer a scholarship to show interest in them. You can search social media to learn a little bit more about them. You can DM the player to start a conversation, or you can contact friends and family. And last but not least, you can send a house. That means give him everything. As you uncover their motivations, there no longer will be a question mark beside it. And if a motivation has a red X, that means the recruit doesn't care about that motivation. Now, if it has a green check, it means that it's very important. With all of this detail they added to recruiting, they wanted to make sure that it didn't consume so much of your time. So you can set it and forget it if you want to, and do the same thing over and over each week, or you can go in and change whatever you want, but it's not necessary. So in stage 2, which is the pitch stage, you have 2 different types of pitches you can use: soft sell and hard sell. If you soft sell a pitch and you get it correct, it will have a moderate impact on the player's interest. But if you hard sell the correct pitch, it will give you the maximum benefit. Now, if you soft sell a pitch wrong, it will moderately affect your player negatively. But if you hard sell the wrong pitch, you can see a drastic change in the player's interest the next week. Each pitch is a collection of 3 motivations, and there are 20 pitches in total. For example, the Sunday bound pitch sells a recruit on your school's chances of being a championship contender, its conference prestige, and your school's track record when sending players to the next level. And how well that pitch aligns with the player's motivations will let you know how impactful it will be when you make that hard sell. Now, if your school doesn't perfectly align with their ideal pitch, or you're trying to sway them another way to another pitch just to get a competitive advantage, you can sway a prospect and change their motivations. Successfully swaying a prospect will give them a second ideal pitch, and that pitch will only be available to you. And they also said that it's possible for the second ideal pitch to create a third ideal pitch. Now the final step is to close the deal. This is when you bring the prospect in for an official visit and attempt to leave a lasting impression. And in order to schedule a visit with a prospect, you must land in the top 5 list of schools, along with offering them a scholarship. Now, you're only able to invite a recruit to your school during a bye week or a home game. And when you schedule that recruit on that visit, you automatically will be charged 40 recruiting hours. But the cost to schedule the visit will not apply towards the maximum recruiting hours you can give to that guy that week. So you still can add another 50 recruiting hours on there, which will give you a total of 90. And if the visit goes perfect, you can be looking for a verbal commit. And they broke the visit down into 2 main parts, which is scheduling and activity. The scheduling part is basically setting the date for the recruit to visit your program. And the activity part is what they will be doing when they get there. There are 14 activities a recruit can do while he's visiting your school. And aligning that activity with your recruit motivations will help you land a perfect visit. Now, let's talk about the transfer portal. As we know, some players come equipped with deal breakers, and those deal breakers are very important to them. And if you sign a player who has a deal breaker, let's say it's playing time, and he realized that you're recruiting players or accepting transfers of players that are better than him that will impact his playing time, he will pack up and leave and go to another university. And once a player has decided to leave, you will be given the opportunity to persuade them to stay. The chance to successfully persuade them to stay is based on their overall rating, as well as your coach prestige. And you know, the higher overall players will be the hardest to persuade, and the lower overall guys will be easier. But keep in mind that you have a limited amount of persuasion attempts, and that amount is based off of your coach prestige. The higher your coach prestige, the more attempts you will have. You can increase that amount by obtaining the gift of gab ability, and you can increase your chance of persuading players by unlocking the roster retainer ability. While players have the opportunity to leave via the transfer portal, you can send them on their way as well as the coach. Every offseason, you are required to chop your team down to only 85 players. And if you have a surplus of players, you will have to encourage them to transfer. Even if you're at the 85 player limit or below that, you still can encourage players to leave as well, just to make room for new players next season. But you can't encourage new freshmen to transfer. Now, the amount of transfers a team may experience varies, because you'll have some teams that have a lot of players leave for many different reasons, and you will have some teams that go untouched. And once all players have made a decision whether to stay or go, the transfer portal will open up in the offseason, which will allow other teams to recruit them. Off-season recruiting has 4 weeks, and transfers will make their decision on the final week, which is National Signing Day. And you will have a tough decision to make whether to continue to pursue high school recruits or jump into the transfer portal and grab you a player that can help your team immediately. And every transfer is given a star rating, just like the high school recruits, which is based on their overall. And since people change over time, you may have recruited a guy who's now in a transfer portal while he was in high school, and you saw that he had certain motivations. And now while they're in the transfer portal, you realize that their motivations have changed. And I think that was a nice detail that EA added, because it adds a realistic feel to the game. And since 4 and 5 star transfers are in high demand, they will only have a list of 5 schools that they will be choosing from. And if you're not in their top 5, they won't talk to you. Also, just like in the real world, College Football 25 features an early signing day and national signing day. Early signing day takes place at the start of bowl season, and the national signing day takes place 7 weeks after the national championship. On signing day, any players that have verbally committed to a university prior to signing day will automatically sign. And majority of the prospects will sign prior to early signing day, but some may last the whole recruiting cycle. Any recruits who are left unsigned no longer go missing. After National Signing Day, like in previous versions, they will stick around and become walk-ons at the university that they had the most interest in. And following signing day, you will have the opportunity to change the positions of your recruits and players on your current roster. This is very important for any of the athletes that you sign during the recruiting process, as they don't have a determined position. And if you forget to assign them a position, they will be automatically signed to a position that fits their archetype. And when it comes to player progression, each player will be assigned one of the 4 development traits. Starting off with normal, which is the most common, and this allows players to progress at the standard rate. Then we have impact, and this is the type of player that can really change a team. And they'll progress faster than normal with a lot of upside. Then you have star, which is a potential Sunday player. There are a few of these to go around, and they'll establish themselves early as quick learners. And last but not least, you have elite, which represents the best of the best. These players will make a statement their first time on campus and has the potential to become an all-time great. And once a player is on your roster, their development trait will be uncovered. And when you're recruiting a player, their development trait is hidden until National Signing Day, unless you have the mind reader ability, which allows you to uncover their development trait when they come to your program on their official visit. And that's all I have for my recruiting deep dive. I know that was a lot of information, but like I said before, I could diss it down as much as possible. And I hope this information is helpful to you guys. And if you're interested in more updates, hit that like button, that notification bell, and subscribe to the channel. And I'm out of here. Peace.